Is it working?
Pup,
Yeah.
pup, pup. Here we go,
Hey,
Sammy.
hey.
Finally, we do it, man.
We did it, man. We finally
got
came.
you over here to Casa Scarface for the podcast, and you are quite the, I guess, quite the connoisseur of Latin music, and just hearing the way that you like said goodbye to the Uber driver when we were on the phone, I was like, you go around wishing good luck everywhere, spreading good cheer. You have a great energy behind you.
Yeah, man. I there's only one way of doing it, being nice, you know.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, I mean, it doesn't take any psychology to be kind to people, you know.
Well, not everyone's in that mode though.
Even when they're in that dusty mode, is still okay, you know.
Well, how do we get people into a more vibrant, jovial? I think I've read some good words. Ebullient is a word that you put on their site about you. That's a great word. How do we get people to spread more joy? You know, they have to harness it. They have to build themselves up, build their own joy.
Yeah. You know, it doesn't take anything. It just takes very few words of kindness to open up a person. Listen, I've met people who are as cold as ice. And what I do is I leave them alone and I let them be who they are, you know, and I'm quiet, you know. If they say anything, I say something kind. After a while, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, then they open up and then all of that goes away. Hey, they might be going through something, I don't know, you know, everybody goes through personal stuff, right? And I just happened to be at that moment at the right time, that I said something at the right moment that open themselves up and they flourish a little bit more. You know, everything in life is psychology, you know, and it's all emotions, you know. And, you know, we went through this pandemic, and I think that this pandemic has changed the whole planet. It's changed me, you know, for the better or for the worse, you know. Either way, you know, it's a new pathway into something new, you know.
Yeah.
My career, I mean, I'm busy. I'm more busy now than I ever have ever been, and it's all because the pandemic has maintained us secluded and isolated for so long that people have made some very harsh decisions in their life to be able to pursue a life-changing things that happen to them personally, you know, and they have taken risk in doing new things that have changed their life for the better. So, hey, this is fantastic. I think it's great.
Well, there's been more freedom.
It's challenged me, at least, and you and everybody. Right?
Well, yeah. Well, there's been more challenge and growth, but also freedom, and tearing down walls and excuses, right?
That's
like
right.
No more excuses about being in the same place as someone to do work or whatever. But at the end of the day, all right, that's kind of real macro here. Every episode, Sammy, is kind of like a little biography book where we get to kind of like, you know, go into your backstory and then end with some of your good habits and some of your joys and see what you can share with others. So, where were you born, Sammy?
I was born in New York City in the Bronx.
You were?
I left the Bronx when I was about 8 years old. My father passed away. My grandparents came to pick me up. They were living in Puerto Rico. I was living in New York. And when he passed away, they came to get me and brought me back to Puerto Rico. And then I went to school there. And I stayed in Puerto Rico till I was about 19 or 20 years old. I went to college, and then when I finished, I came back home to New York, and I haven't been back. I mean, I go back once in a blue moon, but I'm a New Yorker, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you're basically, what was the decision of your parents bringing you back to Puerto Rico from New York?
Well, because of my father's death, you know, I was the only son of my father's, and I was sort of representative of my dad. My father was a singer. He died very young. He was 28 years old when he died. And he was a heavy alcoholic, you know. So he drank himself to death. He lived in a club all his life. That's all he did was sing, drink, and, you know, and he was a heavy bohemian, you know. So I never got to meet him, you know. I was small at the time. And he was too busy doing his thing. And it wasn't till, I know I hate to say this is embarrassing, till now that I finally am really getting to know who the man was, you know, his life, his story. I'm doing a project. I just got a grant,
Yeah.
and this grant is about dedicating this new record to my father. So I'm doing all his old songs that he did back in the '50s, and I'm turning him to a whole different thing, like R&B, jazz, and all that. And I'm gonna transform every song that he did with different artists that are gonna be guests in my record, and hopefully it'll be something really challenging for me.
Yeah. Awesome. So, when you went back to Puerto Rico, your mom went back there to be with family and raise you?
No, my mother didn't go. It was just me and my grandparents.
Really?
My mother stayed in New York, and my brothers, my brother stayed. I went. The idea of my mother giving me to my grandparents was so that I can have an education, and I could do something of myself. And my grandparents were appropriate for that because my grandmother was a teacher, my grandfather was an engineer, so they were very well prepared and very educated. So when I went there, it was for that purpose, so that in the years later that my mother went to Puerto Rico to be with me, I would have been already prepared, for the challenges. I mean, I was young when my mother finally came to Puerto Rico. I was already 16, and so I was well off in high school and over that, and so that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. What effect do you think that had on you, being raised by grandparents? Just like,
I was raised by grandparents.
yeah, more wise maybe, or
It was a lot of fun.
yeah.
Yeah, because even though my grandparents were teachers, and my father's blood, I mean, he was a musician, and so I think I inherited it, that thing from my dad. It's in my blood,
Yeah.
because my aunt was a singer, my uncles were musicians, and so that part I inherited it, and I became in Puerto Rico a musician. After all that studying and all that, I went right into music. I mean, it was my first love. So, I mean, I was listening to a lot of jazz when I was just a kid, and the Beatles came out, and I was listening to all that, and Sam Cooke and all these great artists, and I just said, that's what I want to be.
Right.
I was a singer at the beginning, just like my father, but something inside of me said, man, I'm going to be an instrumentalist. So I became a percussionist. When I heard the first drum, I went completely haywire.
I mean, so at what point were you already playing like the drums and stuff?
Oh, well, I didn't, it's interesting, I didn't start playing drums till I was 20. I heard a record somewhere, Cal Jader or something like that, and I said, oh my God, man, who's playing that rhythm? And then I saw a video of it, and I said, oh my God, this guy is crazy. I want to be like him, And so my mother bought me a drum, a conga drum, and I started practicing without any knowledge of what the hell I was doing. And then, of course, I went to music school and all that. And
in Puerto Rico?
In Puerto Rico,
Yeah.
my grandparents put me in music school, and I started learning how to play a trumpet and a little keyboard, and started really learning how to read and stuff like that. And I was on my way. After that, I knew I was on my way. I didn't know what was going to happen, of course, but I said, hey, at least I'm doing what I truly love, and hopefully everything will manifest. I don't know. I just took a crack at it, a chance. It was, when you do something you love, the rest follows.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I said.
Right. So you pursued that. And what do you remember your first time where, you were respected or paid for your time, like as a musician?
Oh wow, yeah. When I was around 18 years old, I went out hotel hunting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with my friends, a couple of friends of mine, we stuck a couple of amplifiers in the back seat and said, let's go get a job. I mean, that's the way it was done in the old days. And we didn't think about, well, we have to talk to, no, we just went to the hotel and I said, who's in charge? And they said, well, that guy. They said, hey man, we want to audition for you right now. And they go, I don't have any time for this. They kick us out. Then we go to the next hotel and we do the same routine until one hotel said, yeah, let me hear what you do.
Okay.
Yeah. And they said, yeah, I think we could use you once a week here at the hotel. And that was my first gig, in Puerto Rico.
Just opening up doors.
Yeah.
Smart,
And when you're young, when you're a kid, you don't think about anything else but that moment that you're doing things. You don't know what's going to happen, and you go for the adventure of it. And just the adventure of it is emotional, you know. Even if you don't, nothing happens, you go home, and your parents go, "Anything happen?" You go, "No, but we had a great time." You know what I mean? It was great. They kicked us out, and oh man, but that was my first gig, and after that we did various hotels. Then we did a lot of hotels, and then before you know it, a year later, we have a band and we're playing in some of the best hotels in San Juan, and we were on. That's what got me started.
Right.
Yeah.
So where did you make the move back to New York? Like, where did that happen?
When I was 21 years old, I was playing with a band in Puerto Rico, and that band got a gig through somebody, I don't know who it was, in New York City, at a club in New York called the Piedmont Inn in Scarsdale, New York, which is a very upscale area, and this club, the Piedmont Inn, was the social club of that place, you know, where all the wealthy people went. And they hired us to play 2 months in that place. So we were living upstairs from the club, and I thought that was exciting. I was coming out of Puerto Rico with a band for the first time in my life. I fly to New York. It's all exciting. We had a great time. When the gig was over, I met this girl, right? And she said, "Why are you going back? Why don't you stay here with me?" I go, "Yeah, that's right. I try to stay with you." And so I called my mother and I said, "Hey, Mom, you know, I'm not coming back." And she goes, "What? What are you talking about? What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I got some more gigs, but not with the guys."
Yeah.
And I didn't want to tell her I was with some girl. And he says, are you crazy? He goes, no, this is going to be great. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be fine. And I stayed with that girl for about a year. And then we broke up. I go to Manhattan looking for a job. Not as a musician, just a job. Because I said, what am I going to do now? You know, I don't have anything. And I walked around Rockefeller Center. I don't know if you know New York.
Yeah.
And I walk around Rockefeller Center, and there was a gigantic store there. I think it was called Sam Goody's. It was when vinyl was around. You know, there were no CDs yet. And I went there and I asked the manager, "Hey, listen, I'm a music expert. I'm a jazz expert." He says, "You're a jazz expert?" He said, "Yeah, I was the stupidest thing you could ever see." I never heard of a jazz expert. I go, yeah, I'm a jazz expert. He goes, "Yeah, you're a jazz expert. Okay." And I was all dressed up, really, you know, looking great. And he says, "Come here to my office." I think he wanted to embarrass me, you know. I think that's what it was. And he says, "All right, I'm going to play you a couple of tunes." He had a turntable in his office, and he puts a record on. And he said, "I want you to tell me who that is." He said, "Jazz artist." And he played. I said, "Holy shit, what did I get into?" Oh my God, this is not good. I'm just putting myself in a very embarrassing moment, and I should just leave, you know? And he said, no. Puts the tune. I said, "Oh, that's Horace Parlan, Blue Note Records."
Just came to you. Yeah.
And he goes, "Holy, what?" He said, I was trying to stump you. Okay, I got another one. I got one more. If you get this one, you got the job right now. I swear to God, he said. So he played this very obscure piano player. And I got to tell you, I just took a wild guess. I swear, it was a random. I said, "Elmo Hope." And he goes, "Elmo Hope." And I went, "Yeah." I said, "What?"
Yeah. The power of the brain.
"How did I guess that one?"
The brain, man. When you really love something, you
my-
just remember about stuff you never realized you remember.
No, he said, "You're hired. You start right now." And I said, I can't start right now. I got to get myself together. And he said, "Well, look, here's $20. Go around the block and buy a tie. There's a store over there. Buy a tie." He gave me $20. I bought a tie. I came back, and we had to wear these vests that says Sam Goody's, you know, with your name on it. Real corny. And I wore that. I worked there for 3 years. In 3 years, I became the manager of the jazz department. And while I was working at that store, I get a phone call from a couple of friends of mine from Puerto Rico that had a band called Raíces, Roots.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, Sammy, we have a band and we might have a record deal with a major company in New York. I said, what? He said, can you come to Puerto Rico, rehearse with us for a month? And we got about 8 gigs. Then we're going to go to New York. And I said, oh my God. Okay. So I took a leave of absence, which I guess in those days they didn't exist, you know. And I asked my boss, can I go away for about 3 months?
3 months.
Yeah, 3 months. And he said, well, I don't guarantee your job back. I said, it's okay. I'll take a risk. I said, well, go. And I left, went to Puerto Rico, rehearsed with this band. And we came to New York. We signed the record deal with Atlantic Records, which was major. You know, Eric Clapton is there, all these major people there. And we put out a record. And the record did so well. But after a year, the ego went to their heads. And they started fighting amongst each other. And they broke up.
The band, Raíces?
The band Raíces broke up after 2 years. And I wound up going back to my job. Swear to God.
Really?
I went right to my job. And after my job, you know, I said, look, it's obviously not meant to be that I become no famous musician or nothing like that. I'm cool with that, you know. And so as I was in the job, you know, as I was working and being happy what I was doing, this famous flautist came to my store. His name was Herbie Mann. And he was huge. He was a big star, you know. And he came to my store and he said, hey, can you help me? Somebody told me you're an expert in all this. And I said, yeah. I'm looking for some Brazilian jazz. And I said, yeah, I'll turn you on to some new stuff. And I gave him a couple of records. He came back a month later. He said, oh, man, I love what you turned me on to. Beautiful stuff. You have any more? I said, yeah, I got some more stuff. He looked, you know, Hubert Laws and all this stuff. Steve Gadd, and he went home. The third time he came back, he said, would you have lunch with me? And I said, yeah, I would be honored. And he said, come on, let's go to lunch. And he took me to lunch. And in lunch, he says to me, do you play anything? And I said, I play percussion. He goes, do you play congas? I go, yeah. He goes, listen, I'm jamming tonight at Sweet Basil's in New York. You want to come and play with me?
Answer it.
Whoa. I'm like, whoa, God, oh my God.
Answer the call again.
I'm nervous, right?
Yeah.
And
excited.
I was like nervous, and I said, you sure, man? And he goes, Sammy, bring your congas, take the train. You want me to come and help you? He goes, no, I could do it. And I took one of the guys that worked in my job, and he helped me with my drums, and we took a train. And we're holding onto the congas, you know, on the train because there's a lot of people, and we're scared, you know, we're nervous, you know, and we get off on West 4th Street in the Village, and we go, and the place was packed. There was a line around the block, and I walk in the club. I set my drums up on stage. He greeted me with a great smile, and he said, "You ready for this?" He goes, "No." But let's do it. And we started playing, man, and he gave me a solo. The people went nuts. And he says to me, okay, you want to come with me to Europe?
Oh, shit.
And I said, I never, I said, I don't have a passport, And he says, I'll get you a passport. And he goes, my wife will take care of you. I said, oh, my wife will take care of you. So he came to the store, and I said, but Herbie, if I quit my job, then what am I going to come to? Because I'm not going to have a job.
Right.
So
wanted to guarantee.
He says, Sammy, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. He got me a passport. I went from Sam Goody's to Europe. That's like the sublime and the,
Sam Goody's to Europe.
It's unbelievable. And I'm on a plane, in first class, not even in coach, And I'm like looking around like a little kid, all excited. Where am I going? We're going to Switzerland. And I got to tell you, that was the most exhilarating experience of a 21-year-old playing with all these famous people, with Luther Vandross. I not only played with Herbie, I played with Luther, you know, with every pop band you could ever imagine invited me to play. And so for 7 days, I was playing with 2 and 3 bands a day. By the end of the week, I made $10,000, right? I never seen that much money in my life, you know. And it was so I got so nervous, I gave it to Herbie, and I said, I don't know what to do with this. You take it. He goes, what are you talking about? It's your money. I go, I don't know how to handle it. You take it. Give it to me someday. And he says, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you an allowance. When we come back to New York, I'll give it to you. Because deal.
Yeah.
And I gave him the money. I tell you, I never saw so much money in my life. I came back to New York we did about maybe 8 or 9 more gigs around the United States. And because of playing with Herbie, Blondie, you know, all these famous rock bands wanted me to play with them. And I wound up even playing with Eddie Van Halen later, you know, and all that stuff. But it was because of Herbie that I had a name in New York. And then I was the number 1 call for any type of recording in New York City, you know. And then I was the number 1 call in LA, in New York. And then when the awards came, which is another thing I didn't even know existed, which is called the DownBeat Poll Awards, which what they do is they give an award to best saxophone player, best trumpet player, best piano player, you know, best everybody, right? And in the percussion department, I was nominated among 4 of the best in the world, and I won twice. So that was the beginning of my career.
You want it's a Latin Grammy or what?
No, this is no Latin. This is best musician of the United States.
What is the award called?
It's called the DownBeat Poll Awards.
Poll, okay.
The DownBeat Poll Awards, which was affiliated with the Grammys, but the American Grammys, not Latin. Because I wasn't a salsa player by no means. That's why I know you said Latin, but I wasn't a Latin player.
Well, Latin jazz, no?
No,
you just say
that didn't
jazz
even
in
exist.
general. Yeah.
I wasn't even jazz. I was a percussionist. That's it. That played fusion pop and stuff like that.
So you were very flexible, and that allowed you to basically...
Exactly. I didn't play Latin jazz till I was in my 30s. That came way later. I was really doing rock and roll and funk and soul and R&B and stuff like that. That's what I was doing most. I wasn't even thinking of Latin music at all.
Right.
Because they paid me so well doing all this that why did I want to go to Latin music, right? No offense to Latin. I love my Latin people, my Latin music. But it was rock and roll and R&B that was paying my rent. You know what I mean? So later on, when I was about 30, that's when this gentleman named Michel Camilo called me to play with him. And he was like Latin jazz. I started doing that. Then I played with Ruben Blades, and I played with Eddie Palmieri, and then that's when I started doing all that stuff. But it never got to the point where I was a Latin player. I played it, and I really learned the idiom and the rhythms and stuff like that. I did that for a minute, and then I went back to what I normally do. And this is where I am now.
Yeah. Well, what do you say is like the highlight of your career? Maybe a certain show or playing in some peak experience. What would you say?
Miles Davis.
Playing with Miles Davis?
Yeah, that was. I mean, that's the highlight of any human being. I mean, every musician is to play with Miles Davis. You know, I don't know how I got there. Honestly, I wasn't looking for that. I admired him and I listened to his records, but I get a call one night, like, I don't know, out of the blue, like at 2 in the morning. I don't know. It was like something crazy, and I hear this raspy voice. Hey man, what's up? And I went, who's this? It's Miles Davis. And I went, get out of here, man. There's no about this. Listen, I gotta hang up right now. I gotta hang up. It's late. Boom, and I hung up. And I went to bed, you know, and the phone rings again. It's about 2:30, 2:35, and I pick up the phone. I said, hello? If you hang up on me again, I'm gonna kick your ass. That's what he said. And I said, come on, man. Hey, look, it's 2:30 in the morning. I just came back from Europe. and I hung up. I hung up. The third time it rang, it was like 2:45, something like that. I can't remember, 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was a distinguished gentleman. He says, "Is this Sammy Figueroa?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "My name is Teal Macero, and I'm the producer for Miles Davis." And then I said, "Teal Macero?" He goes, "Yeah. You just hung up on Miles 3 times. And listen, I'm not responsible what he's going to do to you when you see him." And I said, I don't know what to say. I didn't know. I mean, who can believe that anybody is sleeping and Miles Davis is going to call him? That's crazy. That's like Michael Jackson calling you, right?
Yeah.
You know. So he said, "Well, listen, can you get here at 8 in the morning? Just go to sleep and be dressed and be ready. Come to this address. He wants your services." So I went. I got there to the studio, and I see, and I was getting nervous, and I said, "Mr. Davis, how are you?" And he punches me in the stomach, like real hard. I mean, hard, that I bent over on the floor. And I said, "Man, why did you do that? What's the matter with you, man? Don't ever hang up on me." You know that.
It's probably the best you could have hoped for, dude. Just a punch in the gut.
And when I got up, he said, "Let's play." Okay, and we started playing. He had drums there for me. And then, from that moment on, I was with Miles for 3 years. I did his album. I did concerts. I did a second album. We were very, very close. He called me 5, 6 times a day just to talk about anything, food, anything, music, whatever, life, women, whatever he wanted to talk about, I was there. And for those 3 years, that was a very exhilarating time for me,
Yeah.
Because from that moment on, from playing with Miles, I got really the notoriety that you really wish and dream about, And from there, I worked with Mick Jagger and, a lot of big names that I always admired, and that's basically some of the story of my career.
Well, no, that's the only first half. From what I know, you've been answering the call since you were born into, opportunities and places where you can be challenged, and basically you've been answering the call many times, and it's gotten you on this path where eventually you build up a little bit of life force and you having your own power to decide things, and maybe asking yourself suddenly, what is my voice? Like, what do I want to create? Like, so at what point do you remember starting to be a little more creative versus just answering the call?
Well, honestly, I never thought, people would ask me all the time, "When are you going to do your own record?" You're past due, you're getting older, you need to do a record of your own. And it wasn't really until I met a person named Rachel Faro. I met her in New York City at a concert that I did for a benefit. I put this band together for the first time, and with a lot of, big names in the music instrumentation. And I met Rachel there with a friend of mine named Robin Ford, who's one of my favorite guitar players in the world. He's one of the top blues guitar players in the world today, Mr. Robin Ford, which I admire. And Robin was a friend of mine, so I invited him to play with me. And he said, "Hey, I want you to meet a childhood friend of mine, Rachel Faro. She's a record producer." And we met, and from that moment on that I met Rachel, that's when the relationship began. And she invited me to Cuba to produce a couple of records for a German company. And she was the one that years later, maybe 10 years, because Rachel and I never stopped working. We became partners. And she said, "You got to do your record." And she was in Miami already, and she got to do your record. I said, "But how?" I said, "I don't know, man. Just put a couple of musicians from Miami, from FIU, from UM, from different." And I said, "You think they want to play with me?" She said, "Are you kidding, Sammy? They don't even know you live here, And so I started making calls. Well, I didn't make the calls. A friend of mine made the calls. And he said, "Hey, man, Sammy's putting a band together. Will you be interested?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And I got all these musicians from different universities. We rehearsed, and we started playing at a club over here in Miami called Van Dyke's. that existed. You know, it closed about 8 years ago, and I started playing there with that band, and we did this every week, once a week. So it gave me a chance to create a crowd, and after playing there for 6 months, the place started getting really packed and jammed. The word started spreading around all over Florida that Van Dyke's and Sammy Figueroa is here. It started spreading in New York and all that stuff. So people were coming from all over the place to see this band. So it was at that moment that I, with my own money, we went to a studio and I did my first album. It was called and Sammy Walked In.
Yeah, I love that one.
which actually Michel Camilo wrote that song for me. He dedicated that to me, and his album, and he got a Grammy Award for his album. And I said, hey, can I use that tune for my record? And he said, are you kidding? I wrote it for you, of course. So I did it, and I called the album and Sammy Walked In.
Well, it's a little more humble that way. That someone else was the one who wrote the song "Sammy Walked In." Because imagine you're like, "Hey, play this when I walk in." Sammy walked in. No, someone else's inspiration was inspired to create that about you walking in.
Michel Camilo was one of my favorite piano players, and of course I played with him for 8 years. When I did this album, I totally forgot about the album because I had no idea what promotion and Facebook, Facebook didn't even exist that time. I think it was just beginning. And somebody called me up from the Academy and said, "Hey, Mr. Figueroa." I said, "Yeah." He said, "We're from the Academy in California. Your record has been nominated for a Grammy." And I said, "Really? My record, Sammy Walked In?" He says, "Yes, sir. You're nominated for a Grammy. We expect your presence here at the Grammys, in about 3 months." I said, "Wow." And I called Rachel. She said, "Did you get the news?" I said, I'm beside myself. I don't know what to say." He says, "We're going to the Grammys." I said, "Oh my God." So we went to the Grammys, blah, blah, blah. The following 2 years, I did another album called The Magician, and that was nominated for another Grammy. And I'm saying, wow, what's going on? My life is like completely changed. And it was at that moment that I continued to do my solo records. I'm now I did 5 records, and now I'm doing this project, this brand new project. After I was just told recently that I got this grant, and we're gonna do this album dedicated to my father. I'm gonna do his songs, those old songs from the 50s, and I'm gonna transform them to R&B, and I'm just gonna change the whole harmonic structure, and we're gonna arrange a whole new thing and make different style of what my father did and see what happens.
Wow.
And so I'm excited about this new project. We start maybe in February or March recording. I got some of the greatest musicians in the world that I admire, that my heroes, that all accepted to do this project with me. So this is my new adventure.
Wow, it seems like your creativity is flourishing, like in your later years. Like
Yeah, it's kind of weird because we had the pandemic and the whole, like we were talking about before, and now that's why I'm saying that this pandemic has changed. It's been a life-changing, emotional, psychological thing I think for everybody, for me, for everybody, and I'm working more than ever. I'm really excited about doing this. This is something that's going to be like a new adventure for me, because I don't know what's going to be the outcome of this, and really it doesn't really matter. I think what matters more is that I got the opportunity to do this, and that to me alone it's already a gift.
For sure. What's the full story of this grant? Because I'm sure there's a lot of artists being out there like, why don't I get a grant for touring around? What's the story of it?
Well, this is called the South Arts Florida Jazz Grants. There's 450 people that apply for this thing. I didn't know it. Rachel and I applied for it, and we sort of left it alone. They say, "Hey, man, only 40 out of this amount of people are going to get it." So, but you never know, right?
Yeah.
You toss it out. It's like a throw of the dice. So we filled it out. It's very lengthy, and it's hundreds of papers, and some of those questions, I don't get it. They're weird questions, and we answered them the best way possible. We told them the idea, of my father, dedicated to him, that he died at 28. We told them the whole story of my dad, and that this is dedicated to this gentleman. Please check him out on YouTube and listen. Go to Google, read his story, so you could see who this man was. And I guess they did. They did their homework, and I got the grant. I got an email, and they said, "Congratulations, Mr. Figueroa, you got the grant." I said, "Oh man."
With the purpose of what? Just spreading that genre more and touring and.
Well, the idea of this is to video, the story, and to go on tour with this particular band, and to tell the story through my music about Charlie Figueroa, and this is incredible because I never met him, I never knew who he was, but this music is going to get me to know my father. How about that? It's destiny that, or the universe, or destiny that has put my path in through something that I had to clarify with my father since I was a kid, since I didn't have a father. I was raised with my grandparents. And so now, here we come to this moment of truth, of clarifying certain things that were empty in your life when you were a child. And through music, this is going to really delineate my whole path to my father.
It's going to heal you,
It's a healing process.
Right.
So I'm excited about it. I mean, and one of the people that's going to participate in this record is somebody that I'm a big fan of. His name is Gonzalo Rubalcaba.
Mm-hmm.
He is already a 5-time Grammy Award guy, and he's one of the greatest piano players that live today. He's fairly young. He's professor at UM sometimes, and he is one of the most extraordinary pianists that I admire, and he accepted to do this with me. And so, I'm excited all around.
Right. In your bio, it says you're interested in spirituality. Was it like alternative science and something else? What would you say? What is an interesting curiosity that you have, or like a passion or side hobby people don't know about?
I hate to use this word, fringe science.
Fringe science?
Yeah. Alternative science. It's really, excuse me, fringe science. I'll give you an example. Science that has been rejected for the past 100 years, right? Free energy, cars that run on water, wind energy, thermomagnetic energy, electric energy, all these energies that have been around for over 100 years that were never accepted by conventional science. You got to remember the FDA, all these big corporations, they make billions and billions of dollars a year in medicine, and the pharmaceutical companies. It's like putting Band-Aid on cancer. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great science out there that actually hasn't been accepted, that you're able to heal cancer, you're able to heal any kind of disease, anything in life. Run your car on free energy, not even electricity, water, hydrogen. And these sciences have been rejected year after year after year because the big corporations make a lot of money in oil. And I hope I don't get killed by saying this, but the oil companies are trillionaires making money on oil.
Right.
And we don't have to use the blood of the earth to run cars and to fuel energy in our life. There's other means and ways that are cleaner and cheaper, and so this is what I'm into.
Right. It's important to, especially when you reach your level of having a lot of energy and resources and being able to make an impact in so many different areas. That's when you really, have the soul searching of like, what do I care about? What are my causes? Like, what can I? So you're passionate about maybe, global warming and helping the earth, go more sustainable. But like, how are you making impacts, a small impact in those areas? Like, what do you spend your attention on or your money donating to? Like, what are your causes, Sammy?
Well, there's different corporations and different companies. I wouldn't say corporations. There are different foundations, let me put it that way, that are geared towards these possibilities, and we need it more now than we ever needed it ever. Because the earth right now is an illness. Is diseased by so much pollution and so much fossil fuel and other deterioration of earth. There are foundations around the globe, in Europe, United States, that are creating new technologies to be able to clean the air very fast, and to be able to clean our oceans from plastics and from all the garbage that has been thrown in the water. And we need, my contribution is pointing the way, is talking to people and saying, hey, let's gear towards this. Let's be part of these foundations. We could be part of 10, 15, 20, it doesn't matter, 100 of them, and be part of them. And the more people that we get to fuel this consciousness of cleanliness and this consciousness of pure air and pure clean energy, we're going to be able to make a huge change. And how can we participate? In many, many ways. We could participate economically. We could participate with our voice. We could participate by telling everyone that clean energy is the way and means out of our situation right now. I mean, I say it again and again and again, our earth is dying because of the ignorance of people not knowing what they're doing. And they're just deteriorating this planet. It's like a huge cancer that needs to be healed right now, and through chemotherapy, that's not going to do it all the way. We need clean energy, to be able to heal our planet. That's my contribution, my voice.
Is that, if you were to shout out a couple foundations or things that you're a benefactor, you donate, what are some of your foundations that you care about?
I have a list in my website.
I know, I saw.
That and even magazines that they can read that are part of this. Raum und Zeit is a German magazine that's now in English. There's all kinds of magazines that are part of this cleansing, and they should read that to just give themselves some information to start right now. And I think the beginning would be just to read, just to look, just to do their homework like I did, and read a little bit about what you can do to help the earth to heal. There's so many ways you can do it, but I could sit here and talk for hours to you about what could be done. But I think that the important thing is to do your homework right now and read some of these great magazines that I pointed the way to. Explore magazine is a wonderful magazine by Christine Jackson, who is a German lady who lives in the United States, and she has been a great example of all the things that you can do to heal this world, heal yourself, and do many wonderful things. I mean, start with explore.
All right, that's one cool little action item. Yeah, I mean, that's one media source. You obviously are in the media, so you run a jazz show on WDNA, right? Mondays.
I have a radio show now for 17 years.
17 years. So is there a story behind that? How you started at WDNA?
Yeah, well, that started at Van Dyke's when I was performing there. A lady in the audience asked me, "Have you ever done radio?" And I said, "No." She said, "You have a good radio voice, and the way you carry yourself on stage, you could be an announcer." I said, "Well, I've never done it." I said, "Would you be interested?" And I said, "Maybe. What do you suggest?" And she said, "Well, I work for WDNA, and I have my own show there, and I like to talk to the people there about you." And they already knew about me, about my music and all that stuff. So that she brought me in, and we did a test, on a microphone, and I read some lines, and they said, "Wow, sounds great. Would you be interested in studying a little bit the gear here, because every MC here has to do their own engineering. There's no second engineer. It's going to be you." I said, "Well, let's do it." And I spent about 4 months studying, a board and the ins and out of it, the microphone, and the players and the timing, because everything has to be clock right, you know. And so there's, while you're talking, you're doing three other things. So it's very complex. It's not as easy as you think it is.
Right.
So you're talking and you have your hand on the board, you have your hand on the CD player, you have your hand on the computer, and it's, I made so many mistakes.
Yeah.
I must have made like 50 mistakes before I got myself together. And it wasn't till maybe a year that I became very fluent in radio. And so here we are. I mean, 17 years later, and I've been very fortunate that my show has been heard all over the world, because you know you can stream now anywhere. It's Greece, France, in Japan, and my show is all over the place. So I'm really thrilled about that. I'm really happy.
Yeah, you're in with the times, you know, whatever it is. Like I heard you have like some social music playlist thing, or people can get involved.
Yeah, you know, I play alternative rock, all kinds of stuff. I mean, Hiatus Coyote, everybody. I mean, I go through rappers, all kinds of different things.
And you're making synths, right? You're making actual samples for people to use in like electronic music and stuff.
I did a whole sampling thing a long time ago that is still being used, you know, for recording artists and for recording studios that they've been using for so many years, and it's still around. Yeah.
So you seem that you keep innovating, you keep, you know, saying yes to new opportunities. What is maybe some words of advice you would have for like other young artists?
Oh man, you know, that's a good question, because I don't have any advice for. I don't have anything, man.
Just say
you know,
yes.
And I'll tell you why. The only good advice I can give, because you know everybody's life is different, and what happened to me is not going to happen to you or to anybody else. You know, everybody's situation is a different situation. The only thing that I could say is that if you're going to do something, do it 1,000%. You know, don't slack off like 30% and then do something else and do something else. If you're going to dedicate yourself to something, give it your all, and it has to be something that you're passionately in love with, or else don't do it. You know, if you're going to get into just straight business and it's something that you hate, eventually it's going to kill you, you know, because that's not what you love. But if you love something, whether it's baseball, whether it's music, I don't care what it is, give it 1,000%. Don't think about the money. Don't think about any of that. Just do it because you love it, because the universe will follow that gift, you know. And it's the alchemy of life, you know what I mean? Do what you love and the universe will supply. Just remember that.
Well, sometimes you also need to throw yourself in situations where you're not sure if you love it. You just have to trust, right? I mean, it sounds like in your career you were constantly challenged to go into certain situations and expand yourself. So you were very gifted with your challenges from the universe, like all the calls to adventure that you were given. Now, do you remember, were there also a lot of times where you said no, where you said, you know, I'm not feeling like I love this?
Yeah, there was a moment there where I said, you know what, when I was in Sam Goody selling records, I said, man, you know what, I'm in New York, I'm working in a record store, I'm going to be the best record salesman in the world. That's what I said. And I was very happy, I was content. And I didn't feel sad by no means. I was surrounded by good people that loved me, and it was fantastic. It was at that moment when I rejoiced, is the proper word, in what I was doing, that the universe opened up its gates. It was at that moment where I said, you know, I'm happy right where I am. If this is what I'm going to be, I'm good. And Herbie Mann showed up and changed my life. It was at that moment, you know. That's why I say, do what you love, the universe will follow.
Or love what you do better, you know, like love designing more of it or loving it. And what I realized, like,
love where you are.
Love where you are. I mean, at the end of the day, and if where you are is not something that you love or that you designed to be there, then move. Then
rejoice in it. Rejoice in it.
Well,
because psychologically, your mind is going to say, "Hey, Sammy, you know, maybe that's it. Hey, maybe that's it. You know, maybe this is what you're going to be." And at that moment, when you rejoice in that moment, and say, "Hey, you know, I love music. I love playing. I love that. But if this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to love this just as much as music." And it's at that moment that the universe says he has resigned himself. Look at this. This guy, what? No, this is what you want to do. And you go, whoa, wait a minute. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
You know, that's why you have to be happy where you are.
Well, I think that's that one point where you feel strong enough in your love of what you're doing and helping the world in small ways, where you say, you know what, you close the door pretty much on envy. You say, I'm not going to sit myself and want to be somewhere else doing something. I'm happy I've accepted my role where I am. And then you start to basically appreciate it more and more. And then the universe will sometimes call you into new adventures, right? But
Exactly.
It comes with like accepting your place. And one thing I've been using more of some of my life coach students is basically putting the billionaire's hat on. You basically say, okay, I had $1 billion right now. What would I change right now about my week, about my life design? And the truth is, the more that you live with purpose, you're actually not going to change that much, right? Because Absolutely, you accept who you are. You love those times with your family. You love those workouts that you designed for yourself. You love all these things that you designed for yourself in your week that makes you happy. And so at some point you would go, I don't even want to change. So that's when the universe will force you to change sometimes, right?
You know, I was speaking, that's a great point, because I was speaking to a billionaire, you know, a while back. A billionaire. He wouldn't tell me, but I knew he was, you know, and I wasn't going to discuss that with him, you know. And I said, what makes you happy? Honestly, that was a simple question. What makes you happy? And he said, well, when I started, he said, I didn't have any money. You know, I lived in a tiny apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment, and I was just doing regular work. You know, I was gardening, I was selling my vegetables and stuff to supermarkets. It was little money, but I really enjoyed doing this, you know, and I rejoiced in that moment and became a vegetable guy. You know, I sell vegetables, you know, and then I bought a bigger house with a little money that I made. And then I had 1 acre of land that I grew more vegetables. Then I bought 2 acres of land and I grew, and I said, man, this is what I love. I said, but what do you really love? He said, well, what I love is art. You know, I said, art? Do you paint? He goes, here, come on. And he showed me like 10 pieces of work that were incredible. I said, you did this? And he said, yeah, why? He said, this is outrageous. This is like something you see in a museum. How did you learn how to do? He says, I don't know. I was just throwing my easel. I have no clue. I said, I just do it. It comes naturally. And I go, this is insane. You could sell that painting for 50 grand right now. He goes, no, Sammy, come on. He says, I swear to you, maybe I'm seeing what you're not seeing. And he goes, maybe so. So he said, no, well, I'll continue to paint. So anyway, I gave him an idea. I said, how many paintings do you have right now? He has about 25. Why don't we take all these paintings and do a little exhibit, a neighborhood exhibit? We don't need any connections, just for the neighborhood. And he goes, how are we going to do that? I said, we're going to invite everybody, every neighbor around, you know. And on the line, and we did a little thing, you know, that said, you know, Mark Howard artwork. Please come to this out. There's going to be food and, you know, drinks and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. And everybody was looking at his art, and they were like more shocked than me. One of the paintings was sold for $30,000, and he sold it right there. Then another neighbor from farther away bought another painting. He sold 8 paintings. He had 20, but he made like $80,000.
Yeah,
like that.
Probably money he didn't even need, but it was probably nice to feel appreciated, right?
Well,
on his end.
For him, it wasn't the money. It was the appreciation. You said it. Right. That he said, I can't believe this. So I said, continue selling your vegetables. You're fine, you know. And he did. And he did. Anyway, the vegetables were selling. And he was doing good. He was working. He was already rejoiced. He was already condensing that moment of vegetables. And he was selling to Whole Foods and stuff like that, you know. Organic stuff. And one day, one guy called him and said, hey, you want to do an exhibit in New York? I don't know what to do. What do you do for an exhibit? I'll take care of the whole thing. You have to trust us that we're going to send all your paintings to New York, right? And we're not going to take them. We guarantee we're a legitimate company. And he had his first exhibit in Seoul. Well, This gentleman is now one of the top painters in the United States. He doesn't do vegetables anymore. He is an artist. He's a multi-zillionaire. He has not only sold paintings, but properties that house paint. I mean, crazy stuff that you wouldn't. And he's a multi-zillionaire, you know. And he told me the story, you know. He told me the story. So here you have it again. When you rejoice in what you love, the universe opens the doors for everything. That is the alchemy of living life. I rejoiced in records, I became a musician. He rejoiced in vegetables, he became an artist. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people.
Right. You know, it takes some good friends or even questioning of oneself to a lot of questions out to the universe about where to find more of that joy and to reflect on where everyone's different. Every human being's different, has
Absolutely.
different background and history that they were not in control of, that made them who they are and exposed them to certain things. But really, we can all look in our past and say, hey, where was I most happy? Like, why was I so happy then? What was I creating? What was I actively doing? Why was I so happy there? And then you can kind of like, you know, start to craft a future for yourself just by starting now and what's accessible to you, right? So. Do you play at home a lot? Do you just have instruments around and you're
I have my instruments. I have all my instruments around the house. Not all of them. I have a lot of them in storage. It would look like a warehouse. But I have enough drums and stuff that I can practice, and toys and stuff, and miscellaneous percussion and electronic percussion that I put my headphones on. I practice and I create things all the time. And Oh, I always have my hands on drums.
Okay.
Always.
So what's one of your secrets then? What have you learned over the years? Maybe like a healthy habit that you have that's unique to your character. Like, you know, what is something that's people like, oh, that's Sammy. Sammy does that. Like, what's like a good habit you have that maybe others can learn from?
My habit, I have a routine, right? I wake up in the morning. This is what I do. I don't recommend it for everybody, but this is what I do. I wake up in the morning and I meditate for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I put it on a timer. I sit on the floor and I meditate. I have to, you know. The second thing I do is I have a cat. I clean the poop, right?
Gotcha.
Right? Then I throw that out, do my bed, have a good breakfast, and my day has begun, you know. And this is a routine, and I do I do some qigong, you know, some yoga a little bit, like 20 minutes of it, and then I start my day. I don't leave my house until I, you know, finish that routine, you know. And I noticed that when I do it every day on a daily basis, that sort of the world becomes, when I leave my house, everything is more cohesive. People are more reflective to you. People say hello. People, you know, it's like when I don't do it, it's like weird things start to happen.
When you go out in the world without having cared for yourself first, you are now almost a disservice to everybody. You're someone that needs care.
You're like a victim of circumstance.
You're like someone that needs care, someone who has a frown, who other people have to lift up. But that's why self-care for me is like the biggest improvement possible in our world is that we start self-caring and appreciating our stories
Absolutely.
more. If we each have better self-care routines, care more about our story, the more we'll be living life with joy, you know, genuine
Absolutely.
joy from having cultivated that and by oneself in the morning.
It's like an internal, you take an internal bath, you know what I mean? It cleanses your aura, your whatever you want to call it, your electrical particles of your life, whatever it is, you start the day with beauty, with harmony.
Right.
You know, otherwise you become like a victim of circumstance.
Well, look at this.
Know?
It's literally like, you could distill it down to the parable of like the shower. Like imagine people in the world right now don't necessarily know how to clean themselves very well. And so imagine they're walking around the world dirty, smelly, annoying people, like uncomfortable because they're dirty a little bit and they're not feeling well. Versus you just teach that person how to clean themselves really well in the shower. Suddenly they go about with a clean little smile everywhere because they feel pure. So teaching people to become pure and to teach and to self-care is like one of my biggest goals in my life is to help people up their energy as they go around the world with their self-care. So that's something I care about. I mean, look, at the same time, I care about community, right? So this is a local podcast, which will scale to other cities. Every city will have their podcast. But basically for Miami-wise, I mean, it sounds like you kind of were pulled to come down to Miami and you had you had some pretty foundational experiences here in terms of becoming creative on your own. Where does Miami fit in your heart? Like, what do you love about Miami?
Well, listen, when I first came to Miami, Rachel Faro, my wonderful partner, she was the one that told me, instead of going back to New York, why don't you come to Miami? I'm living here, and I think you're gonna like it. And I came to visit. I moved right across the street from Rachel in North Miami, and that was the beginning of a whole new life. I liked the weather, the people were really cool. I started meeting a whole new set of friends that I didn't have before. I went all over Miami. Rachel took me everywhere, eating and great food. And Miami has great food, you know that. And then I started going to the music jazz clubs to see what was going on. And that was when I visited Van Dyke's. And it was at that moment that I visited Van Dyke's that I met the manager, that things started like sort of moving, and everything started becoming a part of the puzzle that was just putting itself in place. And so, yeah, I liked everything. I started going to the gardens and botanical gardens to this, and I said, wow, how beautiful. And I said, yeah, I could use this for my life. What happened was that I never left.
Yeah, well, it sticks you here, Like,
yeah, it was the beginning of my new life,
So,
I mean, I went back to New York once in a while, but Rachel kept her apartment in New York, and so I could go to New York and stay with Rachel in New York. I didn't have an apartment anymore in New York.
So what is it about Puerto Ricans love New York so much, But I'm wondering, like, do people consider, what's that point of like consideration of like going to Miami versus New York as like a place of opportunity? Would you still agree New York just has way more opportunity, and that's why people go there? Because I feel like the weather in Miami is more close to like Puerto Rico,
Well, New York is a different animal.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's just a different planet. It's like, you can't compare a Mercedes with a Bentley. They're two different cars. New York, culturally, is unbelievable. It's a melting pot of, for 100 years or 200 years, of people, diverse people from every country in the world that goes to New York and has created their own life there. Businesses have flourished with Italians, with Africans, with Latinos, with Jewish.
I'm
with
just saying,
everything.
I've met just the same amount of diversity here in Miami. It's just like, to me, it's not like a peninsula with skyscrapers. It's like more of a tropical, more spread out, tiny bit, just more spacious, more sun worship, more ocean worship. So for me, it's very similar. I mean, they're sister cities practically. So I don't know. Maybe that's more of a thing in the future as people move in here. But obviously, we're growing very fast here. So a lot of pride for Miami. What are some of your favorite like restaurants or old time institutions, or what do you support?
Well, the jazz clubs, the Vanguard,
still
Blue Note,
still now, yeah.
Still right now, the Smoke and all these places that are legendary that had Harlem. Let's look at just Harlem in itself. Harlem is where in the 30s and 20s Count Basie and jazz was flourishing. Comedy was amazing. The arts of filming. New York is where some of the greatest actors in the world have created some of the greatest films, plays, stage work.
All right, Sammy, what lights you up in Miami?
What lights me up in Miami?
Yeah. What are you proud of here? Like, what are these? Like, where do you go now that have the same kind of pride? It's hard to match, but it's.
Oh man, everywhere. I mean, how do I start? I mean, Miami has now almost as much museums as New York has, right? And I'm a museum guy. I like botanical gardens. I like art. I like all of that. And Miami gives you that now. Now you have the opportunity to get to participate in incredible things. We got our Basel here. We have so many incredible things. Also, the educational part is amazing. You got UM, you got FIU. You got all these great universities that are so hip and so amazingly abundant with so much wisdom and knowledge. Everything in Miami. I mean, it's a smaller version of it, right? Within the context, uh, the thing about New York that you could walk, the you don't need a vehicle to go from point
Right,
A to
right.
B.
So you Ubered here, yeah. I mean, like, your feeling of mobility in New York as a walker is like incredible.
You don't need a car because everything from point A to B is transportable in minutes. In minutes, that something that we don't have here, unless you have a car, right? Uh, you're not able to travel that fast. New York has the fastest and best transportation in the world, and Europe has followed that, and other countries. This is what makes New York unique. Now, what makes Miami unique is the diversity and everything that surrounds it. And now with Uber and all these things, you can do the same thing.
Right.
I don't know about the buses, but they don't run like New
I have
York.
some friends
But
who
I
take
don't think
buses,
nothing
yeah.
runs like New York buses. That's impossible.
They're getting better. They're getting like they're even going to go full electric bus fleets.
That's
They're
what I heard.
One of the first to do it, actually.
And this
so,
is amazing.
Yeah, I thought
So,
you'd be like
so
all
I love
about that.
I love all the new ideas of Miami, and what's coming is going to be amazing. Some of the most incredible architectures here in Miami are amazing. You got Zaha Hadid and all these revolutionary architects that have done amazing architectures here in Miami, and it's only getting better and better and better all the time.
Yeah. So within Miami, this is a Miami podcast. We get cool characters. Who are some of your favorite celebrities in Miami? People who would be fun to hear their whole story with the city.
Oh my God!
You name a few people, just like
celebrities. You mean musicians?
or musicians, people who love Miami, people who live here, who would be fun to interview.
Oh my God! Well, I'll tell you this. Gonzalo is a superstar. He is one of the most prolific musicians on the earth right now. Gonzalo Rubalcaba, one of the most brilliant musicians on the planet. It doesn't get better than that. And and there's people. Oh, you interviewed Hannah, who's just fabulous. Hannah Baumgartner, who is just wonderful. I love her.
Yeah, great energy.
And she's the head of Miami Dance. Let me see, who could I think of that's Jennifer Lopez has a place here in Miami, and she's here. Oh man, at this moment my mind is blanking out because there's so many.
Yeah, but you already mentioned a couple good ones. So
yeah, there's so many that are.
I always got to put people on the spot here because you never know what comes to mind here. But to me, it's a sign of respect. It's a sign of, hey, I would love to actually hear a podcast about this person, like have their life story be brought out like a book real quick. Like what was this trajectory and what are some lessons we can all learn. It's powerful what you shared with us about how you find joy in life and just accepting the call like you have is an inspiration to all of us. So just more people sharing like that is just helps elevate consciousness. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure that there's a lot more people you could talk to that are fabulous, that have great stories as well. My story is a story that I never in my life thought it was any different from anybody else, because everybody goes through their own life stories. But when I think about my childhood till now, to how I got here, it's amazing. It's amazing that I even got to this point, and I say this because when you reach an age like mine and you're still performing and you're still getting calls and there's a lot of interest, that's how much love I have for music and for the arts. It just tells you that there is no age for anything that you do in life. As long as you have your consciousness together and your mind is together, you can do anything.
Yeah, you're chilling by the fountain, basically. You're chilling by the fountain of youth. The fountain of youth for you is the fountain of jazz, the fountain of music. Like I
love music.
All of it. You wake up and you love it. So
I love rock. I love everything. That's the whole thing. Now, one of the things I could say is, don't get stuck in one thing. Don't get stuck in jazz. There's rock and roll. There's R&B. There's all kinds of different genres. And to say that you don't like this, you really have to taste it, because music is like food. You know, you can't eat rice and beans every day. You know, what about Japanese food? What about Greek food? What about Italian food? What about Indonesian food? You know, they all have different palates.
You gotta take a trip once in a while, Sammy, what you're saying. I mean, you gotta expose yourself to novelty, right? But it's good to know what you love, what your foundation is. We got Timon and Pumbaa knocking on the door here. My two buddies from Chicago, they're visiting.
Oh, yeah?
But yeah, anyway, I guess we closed with some pretty inspirational stuff. What's our last question? What's something on Sammy Figueroa's ASAP items list? Like, what's something that maybe you feel like is something you're pursuing right now? And we can help you with the universe. What's something on your ASAP items list?
To help me in general with my life?
Something that you need right now that's funny and that's unique to you. Like, what do you need right now?
Comedy, more comedy.
More
man.
comedy?
yeah, more comedy, more.
They're big. No, I'm serious.
I need comedy in my life, you know. I need more stand-up comedians. More, you know, I mean, I swear to God,
there's
that's what I like.
Amazing comedy, Miami comedy, Manny Garavito. I'll send you his contact details. He puts events on every night. But anyway, I also love comedy. I love making a show. So let's get you into some more comedic videos. And thank you for coming, brother.
Thank you, my brother.
I
love you, man.
Thank you for coming. You're an awesome soul. All right, brother.
Thank you, man, for this beautiful interview, man.
Awesome.